So they have they ran a charity that they started in the 90s called Education for Development, and at one point it got quite big. Well, not big, but 500,000, 800, whatever, 900,000 something turnover, running a few projects. And then whatever, it got mothballed, or somebody was a dickhead, or someone who fucked it up, and whatever, and they got mothballed, and now they just do a few little things in it. And but she said, they got it's like a shell charity. Then I've known her for years, so we know, and we're on the same page. So I can do charitable bids from within it, and in partnership with her, and yeah. And she said, well, lots of things, but it's sometimes it's good to work out a few. Have your thing. It used to be 1 in 6 would be successful. Now it's about 1 in 18 bids. So she said, just want to fire off loads of, and it's worth going on smaller ones, just doing copy and paste and just loads.
And has Andy, your friend from the Permaculture Association, who was very keen on helping you find some funding?
It'll take a little while to pin him down. And I know it's very well intentioned, but I also know how busy he is, and clearly the new person will be the priority, not the also ran. But I think having some really strong ideas would be good. And I think I wanted to use this part of the course to start developing ideas and things about what we're going to do next and stuff. And because it's about, so permaculture is about meeting needs. So what are our needs and what are our priorities? And we could think about that, whatever, for our Academy of Permaculture, and how we could collaborate through that. But really it's local action, isn't it? But we've all got to learn through supporting each other, and we are part of this kind of global movement, or a global connectivity. So I think, in the light of, what we say, we don't know, but in the light of increasing stresses that are beyond control, climate, and then how it's going to magnify economic forces, land, it's going to impact everything, isn't it? Well, it already is. And now we've got resource wars, and then it's going to be, joyously, but it's going to be so many refugees, right? Or let's say displaced people who, and I can see, I guess the UK government, they know what's coming. They're pulling up the drawbridge. And go, well, here's a place we could kind of defend, and we can discount any global responsibilities, because soon there's going to be millions of people coming out of Spain.
Because of the desertification.
Yeah, there's just you can't live where there's no water.
There's no water, yeah.
And they said, the budget, the government in Andalusia have released a 1.2 billion emergency drought response. It's like, you can't buy water. It doesn't, where's that water coming from? Oh, you're going to go and take it from someone else, are you? How are they going to feel about that? And how about the transport costs? And how about or whatever, all of the knock-on implications of doing that, and to have this sort of materialistic view of see water as just a resource. So like the south of England is becoming ever drier, so they'd like some more water from Wales. Well, would they? Actually, maybe it's our water, or it's part of an ecosystem. So if you siphon it out, then the ecosystem dries out, and then there's no more rainfall. It's all connected.
I know.
Water's a product of a healthy ecosystem. If the ecosystem's healthy, water is there because it cycles and recycles, and it creates its own mini energy systems, and all these things we talked about on the course. So as landscapes dry out, the idea of maintaining them by sucking water in from elsewhere is
It's
exactly the
bonkers. I mean,
problem. Yes.
I've been watching some of the reforestation stuff that has been going on in Brazil,
Yes.
and you know what they've been doing. And I mean, Spain is, you know, a million years away with their development and everything that they've done. I mean, they're not even starting to look at all the things that they need to look at.
Yeah.
They're going to be refugees from Spain. They're going to be refugees from Kurdistan. I mean, what's happening in Turkey at the moment? You know, that's all going to blow up. You know, we have, you know,
and some super cyclone has just hit Bangladesh and Myanmar.
has it just hit Myanmar? Yes, Pixie said that they were
I
having
think it
some
was
strange
landfall
weather.
was going to be right on the border there. I mean, so, and we know that these are really vulnerable areas already, clearly, and they're very population dense and they're hemmed in by physical barriers of things like mountains and the sea. Bit grim.
It is grim. I know. It is grim. It just makes you think, God.
It
So
goes,
I'll take you
but
back
clearly, what will happen is, I mean, again, whether it's sanctioned or planned is, but what happens is, people will have to become more fluid.
Yeah.
And not fixed in a place. And I think that the big concrete cities will become unworkable without a lot of energy.
They'll become skeletal, you know, structures and edifices that decay, and unless they find ways of growing up and, you know, doing all the stuff that, you know, we know that is possible. I mean,
but do you think of the energy that it costs to maintain and run the air conditioning and the elevators and the, you know, whatever, you know what I mean?
I mean, all of it. I mean, the electrification that he talks about. Dowd talks about that. He says that, you know, just someone else arriving, Steve.
Yeah, it's Nicholas. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Great. Hopefully we'll
well, I was looking at that. You know, people think that electrical cars are the answer, but they're not.
No. Well,
they're not. I mean, you know, the whole
part of the paradox is that so capitalism has to maintain the illusion that we can keep growing, even though it knows that it can't. Because as soon as you admit that it can't grow, the economy will collapse.
Yeah.
Or, you know, the edifice, the house of cards of the belief system that is the economy. You're still left with you're still left with a shovel in your hand. I mean, this is going to be kind of the theory, the theme of the lecture this week, really. I've called it the economics of diversity. I'm not quite sure why exactly I said that, but the theme is still diversity, so I had to get that in. And I like to talk about economics. So, so that's so there we go. That's the theme, and let's make a start because we're at we have already gone over time, but it's nice just to check. So. Yeah, we're now at session 20 on the Sector 39 online permaculture design course. So we're well into this, and we've been looking at David Holmgren's Principle 10. Nicholas is just trying to chime in. He's dropping in and out. Which is about using and valuing diversity. So I tried to link in these sort of two ideas into this lecture, and I think that let's just see. I'm trying to be clever. I've got two computer screens, which is really good, but I'll keep remember which one you're on. And what have I done? I somehow accidentally pressed the button that freezes your mouse. Aha, got it. Sorry, that was my internet crashed as well, and then I can see Caroline and Nicholas having trouble getting in. Hi, Nicholas. Glad you could make it. Hi. Hi, Caroline.
Hi, Steve. Hi, everybody.
Hi. We have no Gerald this week. He sends his apologies. So you'll have to forgive me if I'm not without his support. But we'll do fine. Okay, welcome. Well, we've reached session 20, unbelievably, of this course. And we're very much in the design phase. And we're thinking about how we use permaculture to meet our needs. That's what we're here for. Everybody needs to eat. Everybody needs, food and shelter. We've talked about that. And the question is about how do we go about doing that? And our theme, being Principle 10 from David Holmgren's 12 Principles, is around use and value diversity. So I thought, let's be interesting. Let's explore this theme of how we meet our needs. This economics within the context of diversity. Okay, so and in my earlier life, I trained as a teacher, and I was an economics teacher in a high school for 4 terms, and it's an interesting subject, but not as interesting as permaculture. But it's come around full circle actually, because it's the study of how we allocate resources to meet our needs, and I've come to think that the definition of permaculture, or a way of looking at permaculture, is if economics is the study perhaps of how people going about meeting our needs, and intersects with ecology, about the needs of the planet, the fact that we're part of an interconnected biosphere. So it also occurred to me that permaculture is the cross point between ecology and economics, and then that kind of opened up my eyes then to maybe think about it slightly differently. So we're gonna spend a bit of time using our permaculture ideas, our permaculture way of thinking, to look a little bit more into this idea of economics, or how we might develop an enterprise, or how we might start a social project, or how do we go about organizing? How do we go about making use of the resources that we have around us, and let's just see what we can learn from exploring that. So I think economics includes questions around I don't know, like, what's money? How did you get to that? What's money? What's wealth? How are these things created? How do we go about in economics, how do they think about these things? And I think one of I'm going to jump into my economics lecture as well in this session. But the first thing is, perhaps is the things that we need. So economics is a study of how we meet our needs. The things that we need are a combination. They come from a result of resources, or the way an economist would look at it is to say the factors of production. So simplistically, there's land, labor, and an idea of capital, which in this sense means tools and equipment. So it's how about we go about meeting our needs. Simplistically is some people might make some decisions about organizing themselves. They might use some spades and some tools to cultivate the land to produce some food. So there's a very simple idea of how we organize to meet our needs. And actually, I'm just going to jump out of this and bring us into stop share. Share screen. I don't know whether having two screens, I'm trying to be too clever. Okay, hopefully you can see that. Economics, how we decide to allocate resources. How do we go about meeting our needs? Let's go back to ask some really fundamental questions, because that what we want to do in permaculture is let's go right back to the basics. We're trying to use available resources to meet our core needs, which is to feed ourselves and to feed the communities around us. Here's a quote from Dom Helder Camara, who is a theologian in South America, a Catholic priest, who said, "When I give food to the poor, they call me a saint. But when I ask why the poor have no food, they call me a communist." So somehow in there is a fundamental question: is how do we go about meeting our needs? How is a decision made that you own this bit of land, or that those resources go to that person? These are fundamental economic questions, and something about this great economic question, which is about who gets the benefit of the work. Who gets what, and where, and when, and what's the price? These are really, really complicated questions, and we're kind of born into a system that we haven't questioned about how we go about making these fundamental decisions. And I think we have to allow ourselves to use permaculture to think completely differently, because I think we're in a different time. We're seeing the structures, the paradigms, the ideas that hold our current world together are being fundamentally changed by climate change, by the ecological changes, the changes in availability of resources and energy, and old political systems, old ideas of money and wealth. So let's go back to the fundamental questions about what's the function of an economy. It's to meet people's needs. It only exists to meet people's needs. So when Don Helder Camara says, well, giving food to the poor is one thing, but actually fundamentally asking why are they poor in the first place is a whole different thing. That's actually challenging the system. But the system's not functioning if it isn't meeting the needs of the people. So there's quite a deep thought to start off. Now I'm going to go back to Again, let's go right back to basics. Let's go right, take. We're going to remember patterns to detail. So let's go all the way back. What is this word, economics? What do we mean by it? What's its root? Where does it come from? I found this diagram once. I was fascinated by this, and this is the layout of an Athenian house at the time of the sort of the Greek, the pinnacle of the sort of Greek civilization, and the Greek civilization was built around city-states. So in Athens, it was described that a house fulfilled a function, and that was to house a family. So in the context of that, all houses could be more or less the same. They could have more or less the same kind of layout and size. A family is a base unit, and living together is a function, a social function. So we organize to fulfill functions. So remember, that's a key thing in permaculture, isn't it? We're setting up a system to fulfill a function, and we test it by saying, is it actually doing it? Are we actually feeding people? Are we actually housing people in an effective way? So this is how the ancient Athenians thought about this. I don't know, 2,500 years ago. Is they arranged their houses in a square around an open quadrangle, a zygziniec even. I say that like I pretend I know what that means. But there's maybe a quadrangle with, imagine with grape yards and some grapevines and maybe some peach trees or something. And the members of the household could enter and leave the quadrangle, enter all these other different rooms and mingle together. So there's a function there, a leveling function where perhaps the master of the house or the mistress or the servants or the delivery people might interact with each other. I don't know. So you design to fill function. So this is like a basic economic idea of organization. So that the household would have some Scipione. Those are public rooms. Visitors and, I don't know, members of the household might come and go and perform different functions in there. I don't know exactly what would have happened in there. Maybe there were servants' quarters, or I imagine people would have traveled a lot and you would have visitors and things like that. So there would be spaces allocated to allow for that function. And those Scipione are arranged around the zygziniec, which is the space where people can come together and interact. So strategic placement and arrangement of elements. Then there was a section of the household which was dedicated to the andrion. Now, what might be the andrion? The android, androgynous. It means male, the male function. So whatever it is that males did in ancient Greece, they had their swords and their spears, or their tankards and their beer, or whatever it was. The male functions of the household were maybe also their quarters and whatever, and maybe male servants. I have no idea, but we can speculate, can't we? And so there's one part of the household, and there's another part of the household, the front, either side of the door, the welcoming greeting area. I guess, and think about that's an interesting thought as well about the placement. So we come in to past the gynecium. So what might that mean? Well, think of gynecology, things pertaining to women. So the female functions might go on there. Again, female quarters, and maybe, I don't know, nursing babies and things that women do, flower arranging. Sorry. No, seriously, but you can think about a sort of specific arrangement. So the only thing we haven't looked at is this area here, between the gynecium, the Scipione, and the zygziniec, is the oikos. And oikos is the hearth or the kitchen. It's the place where maybe the women and the servants come together, and if it was a gender sort of type situation, and produce food which would then nourish everybody shared in this area. And think about that, the decisions made at the oikos, made at the hearth, are going to have external effects. We're going to decide to eat beef today, or eat barley, or and so these are economic decisions, and we're bartering, interacting with the outside world to bring in resources. We're going to prepare them and deliver them to meet the needs of the household. So that would be a nice functioning economy, wouldn't it? So we've got a local arrangement, and then that's going to have a relationship to the outside world. So there's a diversity in this. And even if we just think about in terms of function, they don't have to be gender or class specific, like perhaps there might have been in the times of ancient Athens, but think of it in terms of functions. So it's a very interesting think of it as an organizational structure, and beginning of an idea. So the root of the word of oikos gives us two words. Ancient Greek equivalent of household, house, family, and I also said kitchen and hearth. I think it kind of extends to that, and it becomes the prefix, the word eco. So it gives us ecology and economics. So I said there's permaculture. It's the crossroads between ecology and economics, how we meet our needs, and we do that by understanding diverse functions and bring them together in a coherent way. Okay, so all of this is going to help us think about how we go about organizing and setting up projects and starting initiatives. So if economics pertains to the management of home, we're given this other word, chrematistics, which is obsession with money, making money, the pursuit of wealth, the study and science of wealth. What is commonly called economics is actually nothing of the sort. It's the study of money and the movement of money. So I think let's separate the money from the functions of money. Okay, money doesn't actually serve anything. It's only, I have some here if you can't imagine it, pieces of paper, right? Pieces of paper that these are from all different countries in Africa. They only worth anything in that particular place because someone says so. So if someone says it doesn't have value, then it doesn't. So what's real? Money, pieces of paper just serve a function. What we're actually interested in is meeting needs. They're different. Instead of worrying about the money, let's think about the function. Okay, so back to this idea, this economic question is, well, how are we going to do this? How are we going to organize ourselves, and who's going to benefit from it? And it's complicated. And if we're in a situation where our current economic system starts to malfunction, which it already is in many ways, how would we go about, organizing ourselves, fixing it from the bottom up? And I've touched on this before, but I think permaculture gives us a structure to do that. And I'm all asking questions, then I don't know all these answers, but this is how we have to think about it. So yeah, we've already touched on this. So the first kind of key economic idea, and that's articulated by people like Karl Marx, is the money's irrelevant. What matters is the factors of production, right? Which is land, people to work on the land, and the tools and the technologies that they have to access that. The land includes, the notion of land as a fact of production includes everything on it. The trees, the animals, the water, the soil, the minerals in the soil. Through utilizing machinery and specialized labor force, we can come into that landscape and create laptops and cell phones, or hamburgers, or matoke, anything we want. And it's always going to be a combination of bringing together these three factors. There's a key economic idea for you: factors of production. And then there's the question then about, well, okay, we've got these amazing tools, and or maybe we have restricted access. We'll get to that. But how do we then decide how to use them? How do you decide what it is that we're going to produce, and how much, and for whom, and how do we find out prices? These are all such abstract ideas. Okay, I don't want to go too far into this because I wrote this lecture a few years ago, and it goes sort of. I'll just go a little bit further into. So there's a few basic ideas in classical economics, which are, oh, there's Deborah. How do we start a project? How do we build something? How do we produce resources? We're working together with the land, the things on the land, people around us, and the diversity of people around us, and the idea of tools and capital. Then we've got to decide what to make and in what kind of quantity. And one of the ways in economic theory is we're told what to do by markets. And the kind of apocryphal story is at the time of the Soviet Union, a delegation from Russia, from Moscow, comes to London, and they're having a talk and a banquet or something, and it's making conversation. The Soviet minister says to the British one, so tell me please, who is the Minister of Bread for London? Who's in charge for deciding how many loaves of bread need making every day? And the minister said, I'm sorry, I don't understand the question. And the Soviet person said, like who decides how many combine harvesters you need and how many hectares of wheat that you have to plant, and who's in charge of that? And the answer is, well, there's no one. It's the market. And the ideas, and this sort of reveals the difference between two very, very, very different economic ideas, which is one that a group of people, or a central planned government, or some kind of bureau sits together and works out what we need. We make a calculation, this many people, and you need this many, grams of maize per day. So therefore we need this many tractors and this many acres of land. It's not a very effective way of planning because there's just too many variables involved. The clever thing from market economics, from the system that that has prevailed, is that it's based on a feedback system. There's a feedback loop. So if a farmer has to decide between growing one crop or another, or the baker is making, what kind of loaf to make, is they get feedback, and that's because there's two dynamic opposing forces in a market system, and that is supply and demand. And there's a kind of in the theory is that the supply curve, so we have two variables, is the price and the quantity. Let me slow this down because actually this can be a little bit confusing. So you're a baker. How many loaves of bread are you going to make today? Let's try and break it down to a very simple decision. How many loaves are you going to make? And the answer to that question is going to be influenced by your propensity to supply bread. Is going to depend on the price. The higher the price, the earlier the baker's going to get up out of bed earlier and work a little bit harder and make more loaves of bread. So the assumption is that the baker's motivated by increased price, and so the graph looks like something like this: as if a batch of bread sells for £5, the baker makes 10, but when the price rises to £7 for a batch of loaves, the baker gets up a bit earlier and works a bit harder and makes more. So producers respond to higher prices. That's a basic economic assumption. And then consumers, the people who are buying the bread, they do the opposite. So the demand curve goes is downward sloping. The supply curve goes up and the demand line goes down. And so therefore, when bread is at £10 a batch, I'm only going to buy 5 loads. But when it drops, the price drops to 5, I'm more likely to buy the bread. I'm going to buy 10. So there's an interaction between those two forces, between supply and demand, and at some point equilibrium is discovered. This is called price discovery. So we now know what the price of a loaf of bread is, and this interaction between how much motivation the baker has and how much motivation the person who's going to eat the bread has. And that might change minute by minute, day by day, because there's other factors that influence it. And so the core of the theory is you don't interfere with the market, you let the market decide, and in some ways it's going to be rational and intelligent and make the right decisions. And if there's this is the New York Stock Exchange, so if there's a free flow of information, so if you imagine our economy isn't just people making bread, it's people doing many other things. The bakers that make the bread need to buy flour, they need to buy bread tins, they need to buy energy to heat cook the bread. All of those things have their market, and if you bring all of those market traders together in a single place and they exchange all that information, they can work out the sensible way to allocate resources so that everybody benefits, so that we meet people's needs. That's the purpose of an economy. So it's a great system and everything's working fine. But in this idea, and this is very much the economic paradigm we're caught up in right now, and is that markets will allocate resources to the greatest degree of efficiency. And but there are assumptions to make this work. Obviously, all these people are in this room sharing information freely so that we can make the right decisions. So, but there's an assumption here that the things that we're talking about, like loaves of bread or pounds of fish or carrots, that they're the same. One loaf of bread is the same as another. They're not. Some have been produced organically, some have been, whatever. There's a web of different factors around there. There's an assumption that there's full disclosure of information, that the consumers, the people buying the bread, make rational decisions because they have all the information. I understand this is the best one for the right reasons. It also assumes that if there's a real demand for bread, anybody can set up a bakery. There's no barriers to the market. We can all become bakers, and and then the price would go down, and then some of the not so good bakers would stop. And these are the assumptions of the market. But of course, this isn't true. And what's happened over time is, as companies have become more powerful, they don't disclose anything, and they can block people from joining the market, and they influence consumers through advertising and through market manipulation. And so therefore the danger of market economics is you end up with oligopolies, a few very small, very powerful companies that can then create and change all the market conditions. And that's always the danger, and that's sort of to a degree where we're at now, and that's something that we need to think about and challenge. I'm going to see if I can skip between the two. Oops, there's Stella. She's coming on. Okay, so whilst we're at it, I'm going to throw another question into the mix, which is what is money? Why do we believe in pieces of paper? And if we do, then what function does that serve? Because we've come to see money, or accumulating money, whether it's physical money or numbers on a computer, as an end in itself, and it's not. They're just pieces of paper. and they only have value because we've been told they have value. So that value can go away again. It's arbitrary. So when we go back to the idea of, so this is the difference between money and capital. With capital, with land and labor and resources, we can create money. We can grow potatoes. We can grow food, right? So the important thing isn't the money, because the money doesn't really have a real value. What actually is important is the factors of production. It's having the land, and as we see as we go forward, it's all about the land. It's very, very, very important. So let's hold that thought. I like to go into a very long and convoluted explanation about money, but I'll spare it right now. But is essentially, money tells us what to do. That's all it is. It's a signal. And a metaphor that I use is honeybees. In the world of honeybees, the real thing is honey. You know, that's their stored form of energy, right? So that's their real currency. That's their capital. That's their physical resource, okay? And how do they get that? Well, they go out and forage, don't they? And they collect the pollen and nectar from lots of different flowers, and they bring it back to the hive and they process it into honey. And then that becomes their stored long-term capital. And that gives the hive the ability to survive over a long period of time, okay? And that's their mechanism for resilience. And so when a bee is out buzzing around and it finds a good source of nectar, it comes back to the hive and it performs a dance. It does two movements. It dances on an axis in relation to the sun to show the direction of where, hey, there's some really good nectar over here, guys, and it's that way. And they do that by dancing along that trajectory. And they waggle their abdomen as they do it. This is called the waggle dance. And as they waggle their abdomen, that tells the distance. The length of I'm getting it wrong. Anyway, the direction and the length of the trajectory of the thing, and the waggle just obviously is what brings attention to the bee. So it's passing on the information about how to access the capital. So that is fulfilling this. It's the same function as money. So I'd like to say, let's think about money as information, and it's a signal of saying, are we making brown bread or white bread? Are we growing wheat or are we growing potatoes? Or the nectar's over there. You're going to have to fly a mile there and come back to gather it. That facilitates us meeting our needs. It's just information. So let's not, if you can begin to think like that, you start to think like a millionaire. Maybe that's not the right way to think, but think about money's not the objective. Money's only information. If we could allow ourselves to think about that a little bit? And now it's a challenging thought. So we're interested in functions, remember? It doesn't matter what thing look like, it's like what's its function. So we're going to get to that in a little bit, I think. I'm going to jump lectures now to think about the functions of money rather than think about money itself. Because as soon as you can fulfill those functions, then you don't need the money. Okay. Lost my, there it is. Oh dear. So back to this. Try and follow this thread. So economics, it's the coming together of of ecology and it's thinking about how the rationale of how we allocate resources and make decisions. Ecology and economy, yeah, okay. So we've established the idea that to produce goods and services, to create things that we can turn into money, to things that we can use to meet our own needs and the needs of our community, we need to have, we will draw resources from the land, from plants that have grown, from trees that have grown, from the fertility of the soil. People will interact with that using tools, using knowledge to create the things that we consume to meet our needs. There we go. There's our economic idea. We got back to the beginning. Now, a lot of people, I mean, without getting drawn into this too deeply, a lot of people have thought about this for a lot of time, and especially in the modern era, it's the thing that defines everything, really, is our economic idea. And if we go back a couple of 100 years, people have thought about this very differently and in different ways. This guy, Henry George, who I only actually found out about today, but he said it's all about the land. I mean, to summarize, and so whoever owns or controls the land that's the element that should be taxed, and that people should be free to create value themselves. So he had an idea where a much more egalitarian, a way in which a system in which would focus on people meeting their own needs first by facilitating access to land and people to retain the profits of their own labor. That's not the system that we've gone into. It's very, very interesting to go back and look at this and realize, to see how people who thought about this, had slightly different ideas. This is about diversity in economics as well. I want us to think, we've got into a very singular way of thinking with our current paradigm. So I think that some of these people had very, very important ideas we need to go back to and just check in on. And Karl Marx, the sort of the founder of socialism, who really wrote a critique of capitalism. So he saw the strengths and the weaknesses of it, and predicted pretty much that we'd end up in a situation where we are now, where things are automated and it becomes all about who owns the patent. It becomes about economic intellectual property. And he had a labor theory of value, and he felt that the thing that's the factor of production that matters is the human labor that's put into it, into the system, and into the process of production, and that land is the subject of the labor. So and that's sort of like the labor comes first, and you're addressing the land, you're approaching the land that you're cultivating, and you're doing it with your means of labor, your capital. So you're coming with your spade, with your farming technologies and ideas, cultivating the land, and that the value of the goods that you produce is embodied in the labor that you have invested in it. Okay. So these are more sort of slightly older ideas. Here we are in a slightly more modern world, and let's look at this, and let's bring to a context perhaps in which we can all now relate to. Is the way that we might look at our world is it's actually a combination of land, labor, capital, and enterprise, because it's about you deciding how you are going to meet your needs. Let's feel empowered. Let's put ourselves into the mix, right? So the entrepreneur, the person who and this could be a group of people. That the entrepreneur could be the beneficiaries of the system, which is what a cooperative is. So now let's think about how are we going to come together as an individual, as a family, as an oikos, as a community. How are we going to come together to build enterprise that meets our needs? And we're going to draw upon land, labor, and goods and products and technologies to fulfill that. And rather than seeing ourselves as just passive consumers, as in a consumer economy, I think permaculture wants us to see ourselves also as producers. We have to, and in a real and physical, tangible way, because we've got to meet our needs with more than money. Money has a fleeting, value, and this is a big lesson for us here in the West, where we live such abstract lives. We're so disconnected from production, from the land. We sell our labor in the market, and then we go and buy everything we need in shops, and that leaves us feeling very disempowered. So okay, so let's think about land, labor, capital, and enterprise. And I'm going to, I want to broaden the idea of capital. So, because I want us to think in a more diverse way. And I want us to think in a much more empowered way about how we might go about meeting our needs. So we're the enterprise, we're the entrepreneur. It might be you as a person, you as a family, you as a community, you as a physical group. Let's think about how we organize ourselves to meet our needs. Between us as a group, there are natural resources out there that we can access, and we can begin to use that to create products. If, as permaculture designers, we're going to look to see what land resources are out there which are available. So rather than go, we need to import something from somewhere else, what have we got there in front of us? What are the resources? And we've talked already about how we might organize that. There's questions about how our own input, and how we organize and motivate other people to join in. And let's look at the technologies and tools that we have available, and let's try and draw from what is available to begin our enterprise. Because we want to create something that we can start, not be waiting for permission or outside resources to be able to do it. So, different forms of capital. I've given you land, labor, and capital, and we're going to come to this 8 forms of capital in the next part of the lecture. But I thought I wanted to tell a slightly different story beforehand and put it more in a grounded permaculture way. So I'm going to show you an example of a real project where they built something out of nothing, and they used different forms of capital to achieve that. Social capital, material capital, financial capital, living capital, intellectual capital, experiential capital, spiritual capital, and cultural capital. So we're gonna come back and enlarge on these, and we're going to do an audit for ourselves and think about the resources that we have available to us now to begin an enterprise that's going to meet our needs. Here's a very simple way of thinking about how we answer that economic question. What are we going to produce, and who's going to benefit from it? Let's come together as a community and let's achieve that. So I'm going to give you an example. I've got a couple of people arriving. Greetings, Stella and Simon.
Greetings.
How is that side?
Okay.
Hello. Good.
We should be seeing Garth Hillside Organic Garden. This is this is a talk that was done in 2008 on a permaculture course that I was running, and so it's a snapshot of a community garden project from a whole bunch of years ago, and it's from their early establishment phase, and it's gone on and had a illustrious and amazing history since it was established. So this is in its very early first, I forget, 2 or 3 years. They didn't quite have a photo of the hillside before the garden started, but let's just imagine that all of this is covered with this same shrub here. This is a very hardy, nitrogen-fixing shrub that grows in temperate climates. It's called gorse. So you have equivalent plants to it in Africa. And look, it's growing on very steep land that actually had been quarried and mined in the past. And we're seeing this plant growing there. And it was regarded as waste. No one could see a value to that land because it was high up, it's too steep, and it's not very fertile. There's no real soil there, and the access is poor. So what happened was a local group of people spotted that. They went to the person who was the actual owner and said, "Can we have permission to develop a garden on this hillside?" And the owner of the garden said, "You won't be able to develop a garden there, waste of time. That land's useless." I said, "Well, can we, try anyway?" And they said, "Well, yeah, sure." And because that person saw no value in the land, because it was useless, they said to the community group, "You can have it for nothing." So the group gained access to land by negotiation and by having a vision and having an idea, and they spoke to that social gatekeeper, that person, the owner, and with those skills, they unlocked that piece of land and then made it available. So they have land. Well, once you have land, you can start to grow and create the other resources that you might need. So let's think about using a permaculture mindset to build a project kind of out of nothing, but by using social capital, by using your ability to motivate and inspire the people around you. So this is how we think about this. Think about this as an economic idea. And any of you there starting a permaculture project, wherever you might be, in Nachi Valley, in Kakuma, in Western Nile, in Reading, in the US, wherever you are, the same ideas apply. So they came into this very, very steep piece of land, and they looked and they tried to make some sense of it and to see the shape of it. And the woman behind this, whose name is Judith Wright, got some support from the people around her. She was a good communicator, and she said, "Hey, let's come together and build a community garden, and a garden that's going to help us all meet our needs." So those members of the community become stakeholders in that project. They're going to benefit from it, and they're going to help shape it and plan it. So we're starting now to build a relationship between land and people. Well, we've now got land and labor. This is the beginning of being able to do something. Well, we can ask around locally. We managed to have some tools, and a plan started to form of, well, let's come in. It's a steep slope, and we know that we don't want to create erosion, so let's come in on contour. Let's start to clear and harvest this gorse plants. Here we are, coming onto this steep land, starting to harvest these plants. But understand that we've done our analysis. This plant helps build soil. It fixes nitrogen in the soil and builds relationships with root bacteria. And so as we harvest this prickly, difficult plant to work with, we're going to compost it. And we're going to see it as a resource. We're going to build the garden out of what's there already. So we don't need to import anything. So there's our land. The land now in economic terms is the land and the trees on it. And there's our labor with capital, with a saw in their hand. So they're using their skills and knowledge. They're motivated not by money, but because they're a stakeholder in the project. They will be a beneficiary. And there they are working away by hand and clearing the land, but then also valuing the materials. They're not just burning them. They're not just throwing them away. They've organized and processed them, and they're now going to use those materials to build the garden. So we've converted our random trees now into the resources which we're now going to build our garden with. So think about this as an economic idea: land, labor, capital. And then as the entrepreneur, we're coming up with a design in which we're going to catch and store energy. Remember, that's the permaculture way of thinking. We're observing, interacting. We're beginning to implement our design. And here we are. Look, community. We've been able to communicate the idea enough to motivate people to come along and to donate time. Slowly a shape starts to form. So this is now the garden. We've got an entrance, and we're going to have a path on the contour. And we've retained all of this material, which we're now going to start to build our raised bed system. And we're going to compost everything we can. Any soil that we're not using, topsoil, we're going to build it up into the raised beds, catch and store energy, build the ability to attain yields. We've thought about the solar direction of it, and we can see together a little pattern is coming together. So there's a design skills, there's the skills of cutting and processing the wood. Some people aren't strong enough to carry, but other people have got other ways in which they can contribute. So we've got a diverse group of people coming together through design to create a system that in the long term is going to meet their needs. These are economic decisions, and this hasn't required significant inputs of energy from outside. Here they are, building the first raised bed and building relationships as children, as different people from the community. I think this guy's taking the photo to tell the story. So again, and this is building social capital. The more connections you have to the people around, the stronger the relationships around the garden. So we think about, and look at all of these materials here that they've gathered together. They're going to slowly process that to make more soil. Here we get the first crops. Look, they've found stones locally. They've done a bit of weaving, and these look like broad beans. So they're going plants that fix this, a fava bean. This also fixes nitrogen. It can grow in poor soil. It's a good biomass. We get lots of compost material from it. We're starting a succession. We're trying to build fertility now. And again, we're using our intellectual capital, our knowledge of gardening. Okay, that doesn't cost money. That you're drawing on your own reserves of experience. So we're seeing here, look, the next area being cleared, and using now that they've got their design method going now, they've got their little contour path or close to contour path, they've got the raised beds. You can see how they're conserving the soil and building up their system. And more materials coming in. Think about a notice board. Look how we've got deliberate strategies to share information and knowledge, to reinforce the cohesion of the group by giving them back the information. We want everybody to be fully aware of why we're doing this, so they feel included. We've got a soil association logo there on the notice board. That's saying this is an organic garden. Our intention is to do this working with nature so that people coming in can understand that and take part. And here we have it further down the line. This is a wild plant, foxglove growing, and it's part of the succession of what happens when woodland area is cleared, and it brings in lots and lots of pollinating insects and helps drive and build the ecosystem of the garden. Here we go. Each you can imagine with each season, the beds become a little bit more developed, the patterns become a little bit more established, the skills within the garden grow, and the intellectual and social capital increases in value. So what they did was have access to a bit of destroyed, useless land, and slowly turn that into things that are going to meet their needs and meet the needs of the birds and insects around, and the emotional needs, and this garden becomes a place of healing for people to come and to relax, to enjoy, just the colours, the smells, the calmness, as well as the food. So multiple yields from a very creative use of an otherwise undervalued space, creating niches for wildlife, and here we are back at that. The first beds now becoming more established. I mean, again, it's interesting to see that these pictures are from 15 years ago. So the garden now, I'll show you those another time. It's really come on. First structures coming in to create a base for the people. Look, there's a team thinking about the coming together of the people that represents. And with each season, the maturity of the garden and the value is going up. Some harvesting apples and making juice. I think it's wait, no, here we go. On it goes. Each year, each season, there's like another layers added to the garden. Structures, more spaces for the people. There's a composting toilet and sort of changing area and refuge from the rain. And there you go. Building something out of nothing. It takes time. It takes organizing. But it's okay. I hope that's interesting. And again, it's always the challenge is, I'm showing you there something from high up on a mountain in Wales. Think about how that translates to your situation. Yes, slow and permanent solutions. It's yeah, thank you. Yes. And think about that slow building, and think about that combination of factors. Someone had to have the idea, someone had to have the vision, someone had to communicate that to the landowner, to the stakeholders, and to create that belief that's even possible. And so think about how, that just to understand that how permaculture might facilitate that process, because that's where we're at. We're trying to build something out of nothing. So yeah, Great. I'm going to go back to my PowerPoint now. I'm weaving this together as we speak. I think this really ties it all together. So I'm just going to navigate this share screen thing. There we go. Okay. So you're the enterprise. The question is, how do we access the land? How do we motivate the labor, and have a sense of what tools and other forms of capital we might need to bring about our enterprise, our strategy to meet our needs. Okay, so we've been to the Garth Garden, and let's just see. We're going to expand on these things. So we talked about different forms of capital: land, labor, and capital. So there's financial capital, having money, and with money we can go and buy the things that we need, the materials, the tools, the what have you. But we didn't have any financial capital here. Instead, we had social and intellectual capital. We had Jude and her ability to motivate people and to connect with people, her experience perhaps as a gardener. That project could draw on the cultural capital of the people around them, the knowledge and skills that they had with them. When they went to the land, there was the living capital. There was the gorse bushes that they harvested to build the garden. So we can now start to think about these different forms of capital. Is okay, you might not have loads of money in the bank. You might not own a big tract of land, but hey, you're part of a community. You have intelligence, you have experience, there's a spiritual dimension, your ability to connect with each other in an altruistic way, in a long-term way, in a visionary way, through prayer and meditation, through guidance and through understanding, common cause. And we have a cultural capital to draw on. So let's now think about so land, labor, and capital is what we need, but the capital breaks down into 8 different things, and some of which we have and some of which we don't have, and we can use the ones that we do have to navigate around those that we don't. And think about how, as the Garth Garden developed, drawing on their more human skills and experiences, the revenue came, financial yield came from that in the form of the produce, and then with that produce and the if you like, the value of that produce then enabled them to go and access financial resources like funding, like money from charities or government incentives that exist to support businesses. So the thing that you've got to do, or your objective, is to begin the process, and with what you've got. And once that process has some momentum, then the next layer of possibilities presents itself. Okay, let's just explore down on these 8 forms of capital. And we started off by saying Jude, in an example we looked at, she had social capital. She was someone, she had connections, and she could use her social capital in the form of connections to influence people and build relationships and motivate people to come and join in on the project. So that's something that you, within your group of people, will have that ability. You'll have to tap into that social capital. Let's look at the next one. Intellectual capital. That's ideas and knowledge. And that might manifest itself into words, images, intellectual property, your ability to communicate, your ability to problem solve, your ability to grow your vegetables. We all have our own experience. So think of experiential capital, what you've built in the course of your life through your actions. And from that reflecting on actions and experience comes wisdom. Wisdom you could define as being able to see the patterns. Maybe Jude, who started the garden, had enough experience in the past to go, we can do this again. I know it's possible. So yes, money, financial instruments. So financial capital translates into money, and money can manifest itself in financial instruments and securities. So that ownership of stuff and long-term reserves, things that can be turned back into money again to invest in the system. There's the living capital. That's the carbon, nitrogen, and water, the soil, the living organisms, the land, the ecosystem services. So through the living capital, Jude and the team were able to then to generate the materials that they need to then for buildings and infrastructure. Look how they produced it from the land using intellectual and social capital. So we can bypass, we haven't got any money, by accessing and valuing other parts of the elements of this capital thing. So there we go. Cultural capital, maybe communicated through songs and stories and rituals, but these are the things that hold together community. And I think also from community becomes our knowledge of how to cooperate with other people. And what we learn is if you create the right conditions, then people will behave in the right way, are coming together. So we turn our capital, social capital, into a currency of influence and relationships. We turn our material capital into a currency of tools, buildings, infrastructures, so on. Capital and currency. In thinking about this, I also went to and again, just picking up on the other strand of the economics lecture is there's different types of economy, and this is about diversity, and the theme of this lecture is about diversity. So let's not force ourselves to think in a single way. I think, or I observe, or I see that, especially at times of change and of flux and of evolution, is sometimes these different types of economic systems all tend to actually coexist at the same time. So it's not as if there's just one way of doing things. I think there's better ways of doing certain things, and then there's other ways of doing other elements, other things. The traditional economic systems, imagine kind of village economic systems. I think the oldest idea is just the gift economy. It's the idea that if there's something that's needed, like the economy exists for people to meet their needs. So if we grow some potatoes and you need a potato, I just give it to you. And I know that because you're part of my tribe, you're part of my community, you're part of my family, that you'll contribute back in some way. And we might facilitate that exchange with tokens, with some kind of currency, but in the same way as the waggle dance of the bees, it's just signposting people where to go and what to do when they get there. And it's so as a community, we have access to land, we organize ourselves with people, and we have a cultural sort of capital which tells us how to go about building houses out of mud and straw, how to go about building our Lorena stoves out of the materials around us, doesn't necessarily require large amounts of money to do that. Second kind of system that we touched on was the command system, or where there's a group of people who make the decisions and make decrees, and this type of decision system seems to not be very efficient because there's not enough feedback. We need to somehow have that market mechanism which tells us exactly how many of a thing to make, or to find out the relative value between a potato and a chicken, and that's something to do with supply and demand. But we've also learned, because we've looked at we've looked at economics a little bit, we realised that pure market systems have their own problems, and as Karl Marx pointed out, they tend to accumulate wealth to the top. You tend to get very big and then inefficient companies or decision-making systems, because and which then limits the flow of information, and it starts to break the rules of the market. And that's kind of the situation that we're at with the global market system. And so the kind of the hybrid is a mixed economic system where we have governments, institutions, charities, NGOs. They make decisions in a command way, and then create a framework within which little markets can set up and allocate resources efficiently. That's what I saw in Biddy Biddy. That's what I see in the settlements. And Caroline or Stella, you could tell me what you think about that. But when we went to Biddy Biddy, I could see it was like a command economic system. There was a central planning body that had said, right, we're going to put a matrix of roads here, and we're going to build a hospital there and a school there and have housing there. Those decisions had been made strategically by the United Nations people, the World Food Programme people. So there was like a structural decisions made on a command system. And then within that, people were invited or had the opportunity to start their own little shop selling nails, or their own little shop selling washing detergent, and we could have little market system going on of people meeting the needs of the community. And that kind of, how many shops selling nails do we need? How many shops selling planks of wood do we need? Well, that little market system with information flowing, that helps solve those problems. So in many ways, the economic paradigm that has worked the best is these mixed, hybridized economic systems. And I think that we actually can incorporate some of our traditional and barter-based systems into our mixed systems. So without getting so ahead of myself too much, is let's allow ourselves to think differently. Let's allow ourselves to embrace diversity in this process of how we allocate resources, how we make decisions, and how we decide who benefits from the products. And as I was putting this together, I started to think again is about, in permaculture, we're interested in functions, and we understand that money is just a tool to help us to get information and to sort of make decisions. And economy is trying to answer these questions about understanding the needs and behaviors of the people, the beneficiaries, the stakeholders of the economy. When the market system doesn't work, how do we fix it? The problem with oligopolies and monopolies. Can we predict what's going to happen next? What are we going to do next year or the year after? We know the price of maize today, but what will the price of maize next year or in 10 years be? That affects our ability to make decisions. And economics should give us the information to make good choices, and choices which achieve social efficiency. That means everyone gets their share. Now, these are hugely challenging ideas because in many ways we're not getting our share and we're not effectively distributing resources. And the other failure of our economic system is it encourages us to not value the environment. This sort of market-based system fails to see, because we're constantly eroding into the environment for new resources. So it's our relationship to the land and the things that are on it is one of the things that is malfunctioning in our economy. And economy being the rationale with which we make decisions, and the decision always is, let's chop down that tree, let's expose that soil, because it gives me a short-term income that I'm going to consume, but at the cost of the land, of the capital, the thing that matters. So whether I've laboured this point or not, it comes back to it's the land that matters, that we are serving the land, we're investing in the capital. So in the process of serving the land, catching and storing energy, building its ability to produce yields, we're also creating social capital, intellectual capital, spiritual capital. We're building a community around the caring of that land to produce resources. Do you see? We've got it upside down. We're eroding the land to create income. Instead, we should be using income to build capital. And that's permaculture. And I think that's the heart of the permaculture economic idea that I'm trying to get to. Okay, how are we doing for time? We've done an hour and a half. I think we're just going to should we have a 5-minute shakeout and stretch? Can we have just maybe a few comments would be really nice. I've gone off on one a bit, but it's, I hope it's interesting. And I think we're wrestling here with some quite fundamental points. We're missing Gerald today to summarize for us. So anybody, any thoughts?
Hi, Steve. Shanaz here. Sorry, I'll start the video. Sorry, it's a bit in darkness. Steve, can you hear?
We can't hear you, Shanaz.
Okay.
You're not muted.
I don't know why.
I heard you beautifully earlier.
Mm-hmm.
You're muted now.
I don't know why.
Now you're not, but we still can't hear you.
Huh.
Ah.
I was going to see. It's
okay,
fine.
Simon. I'm going to go with Simon, Shanaz.
Good evening, everyone.
Simon, please.
Yeah, you were talking of the factors of production, whereby you mentioned of land, labor, capital. Yes, well, production
You have to
has
unmute. Oh no, you're. Oh, it's me.
It is you.
Okay. I apologize.
Yes,
I now know why. Oh no, I could hear you before though.
Hello. Are you getting me now?
We can hear you, Simon.
No, I can't hear you.
Yes, I'm hearing you. So I was saying.
That doesn't make sense because I heard you before anyway.
We were talking of the factors of production.
Okay, well.
Whereby with the production.
Okay, yes, we'll do a tea break. I'm sorry, I can't. For some reason, I can't hear anyone. So we'll take a short break and back in a few. It's on the air. We'll come back at 5 past. I'll give it about 4 minutes.
Okay. Steve? Steve, check your settings.
Are you there, Stella? I just want to see if I can, why I couldn't hear before.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I can't hear you. Shanaz said she could hear Simon before, but I couldn't. I don't know why. That's really annoying. Okay, maybe I'll Okay. I've got it now. I understand what I've done. Got it. Sorry, everyone. Stella, speak now. Hello. Oh. Okay, I can hear you. I was getting interference, but yeah. Okay, I can hear. I can hear now, Shanaz. I know what I did. I think. Would you like to try speaking for me now?
Can you hear?
Yes. Hooray.
Good.
Okay.
I don't know what I
Good.
was going to say before, so don't ask me.
Okay. I'm sure it was very interesting.
But-
yeah.
So Simon was saying something, I think.
Simon, when you're ready,
Yes,
please.
yes. I'm also doubting on our communication. When one is not getting us, it is really so worrying. Yeah. And I wanted to talk on the factors of production that you were mentioning, whereby really it is necessary, for us as members of permaculture to arrange all those factors together. When one factor is
Now Sam's dropped out. Frustrating. Simon's observations are always very, very worthwhile hearing as well. So we'll
Let's
get
see
him
if
to
we can
repeat.
get him back in. There he's back.
Yeah. Oh, he's gone. I'll explain. I'm sure he'll be back. Here, there he is. Yeah, please try again, Simon. We missed that. Do unmute and repeat that, please. Cats love Zoom, don't they?
Cats love Zoom.
Simon's still struggling. I think I'm not hearing him.
where land is the vital factor of production.
Right, yes.
So necessary, we have to arrange it. And if that land that you have arranged for production to take place is not in a good state, then you as a farmer of permaculture have to see how you can create it and make it vulnerable for your production to take place. And you bring in the other aspects of labor force. Labor force is really something very neutral and important in production as a factor. But at a certain time, when labor force is inadequate, then automatically it becomes a problem for a farmer who wants to make his production at a standstill. So I also call upon for all those factors to be arranged, irrespective of the level or any stage where you are. Really, it is necessary for one to arrange all those factors. Like today, as I was in the Ngora Town Council group, where I joined my mentor Deborah, we were bringing that group onto Lorona construction. And when I look in the factors to be considered in that process of making that Lorona, it really reminds me of what you have just spoken today, of the factors of production, where one has to join the effort of labor besides capital, but labor, land. So all those resources have to combine it together, and we see that production itself is to be mentioned. I think capital itself, you know, when you talk of capital, most people really believe in financial aspect. Eh? They believe in that cash thing, but capital itself is something very wide that people have to look into it and see how they can bring it and bring production to the level that we can treat all communities, all people, or to sustain and to get all their needs and their wants that they want at the time that cash itself is not there. That's why, to me, I say capital, land, and then labor force are really vital factors of production that we should consider. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Simon. And yeah, so the Lorena stove is such a great example in that the land resource of the mud and the termite mound, the sand, is and mixed together with, if you like, the intellectual capital and the social capital to organize and to plan and to know how to make it. It doesn't require financial capital to achieve that. And then in process, we're building our capacity then to meet needs because we've now got a more efficient cooking method. So think about that and actually that creates value within the community because we've now got better tools to meet our needs. So instead of running down capital, we're building it. And the other point you made so well is that people just see it as being about money, and they say, but I haven't got money, so therefore I can't start my enterprise. And instead of seeing that as a limiting factor, I'm inviting you to look at that more creatively and to see around other ways forward. Caroline, any thoughts from you thus far? Is this kind of getting you thinking? I don't know if you're able to comment, but I always welcome your input.
Okay, yes. We were talking about the capital, but okay, in a capitalist setting, capital is basically finances. But in the permaculture world, I would say capital is the resources that you have around you that you want to harness and use to get you from where you are, to move you from where you are to where you want to go. Is that making sense, anybody?
Yeah, very much. It's not just money, is it? It's knowledge. It's the ability to organize, to motivate people around you, and to see the value in materials that other people can't see.
Yeah.
Permaculture encourages us to see the value in waste or in
Exactly. Yeah. I remember during my PDC that ended almost 2 weeks ago.
Yes.
The mama was wondering. I had collected such funny stuff, and had told them very well somewhere.
Yeah.
So that just some very funny stuff, and they were wondering. I mean, what are we going to? What are all this? But after we did the theory, now we were doing the practicals. Everything fell into place. And they went back home and they've been sending pictures of what they've been doing in their own small gardens. And so I believe we moved them from the fact that, okay, in order to do anything, you need money. You
Yes.
need to put some things to achieve something. We made them think out of the box. Like all this stuff you see lying around, yeah, you can use them in order to do something, produce something. Thank
Absolutely.
you.
So again, it's the idea of designing within limiting factors, within the limitations. If you've only got $10 and your budget is for your design is $9.99, you can go forward. Without it, it becomes a blockage, and and we have to begin. Simon, you have your hand up again.
On a land itself, what is the value of that land? One, how valuable it is for you to utilize it. That is one. Two, how fertile it is. Huh? How fertile it is for you to continue with your production. If it is not fertile, you as a farmer of permaculture design, you are to create ways of making it vulnerable for your production to take place. And then two, how 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 far is a source of water? How far is that source of water for you to use it in your farm, for you to use it in your land? If it is not there, make designs, create ways of constructing that source such that it enables you in that process of your watering processes during the time when rain itself is scarce. And then three, four, how far is your land with the transportation system such that it enables you to make the productivity from productivity to the marketing process to your final consumers. All that are supposed to be there. And then the financial institutions, how far is that land from those financial institutions such that it enables you to bring the other aspect of cash, the other aspect of capital, whereby one can run into that financial service and then asks for that factor of production. And then how far is the labor force that you are going to use in that land? What are the protocols that you will bring in into that land such that you call upon the cheap labor force that will help you in that production of your project in that land that you have designed? And then energy itself, how far is the energy that you are to use in that land to make that process of production run through? You see, so and then labor force itself, if you are alone in that farm or you are trying to bring communities or members of the community into you to join you to benefit the project that you are making, what are the things that you use to bring them in such that they will be motivated in that activity that you are doing, and it will create them, get knowledge, impact them with the activity, and they catch up with you? How cheap, how the conditions that you put into them such that the availability of that labor force would be necessary in your farm or in your land that you are to use during the time of your production. All those factors, when one is not there, then eventually the production itself has to remain standstill. It will not continue because one factor is missing, the other one has been mistreated. Probably we are to continue with all the factors of production from time to time, from wherever you are, all culturally, socially, economically, all those aspects have to be arranged, and then production takes its process ahead. Thank you. That is what I wanted to add on.
by creative thinking and problem solving, we can design around these limitations. And as you say, even if the land isn't fertile, we can build the fertility. Exactly what I showed you in that example was, in fact, the fact that the land was difficult to access is what made it available to them, because they weren't competing against someone else. Yeah.
Something that you talked about your experience in Birmingham. How you talked about how doing different things in area. Coordination. So meaning it becomes very difficult. For example, someone knows landscaping, another person knows more about water issues. There is another person who is good at soil. There is another person who is good
Hello? Hello? Hello?
Hello.
I thought it was Stella who was talking, not me.
Oh, right. It was confusing. Again, because we weren't hearing you.
Yeah, it was Stella who was talking, not me.
Oh, okay, right. That was the confusion. Sorry, Stella, we
Okay.
weren't hearing you. It was really
Yeah.
breaking up.
Yes. So what I wanted to say is, to Simon and all of us, when we are farming and you have a product that people want, normalize people coming to the farm. We have something in Kenya we call farm gate prices, because people come to the farm and they take what they want, it's fresh. And, if you have something that people need, they will come for it to the farm. If they know that it is organically produced, it is safe, it is nice, they'll come for it on the farm. So you as the farmer, you don't really have to go out into marketing and all these kind of things.
Yeah, thank you, Caroline. Thank you. Good points. Just looking at pictures from, I don't know if you can see that. This is from Deborah. They are making a really nice looking stove there. Can you see that? Yeah. This is straight from Tapa. And really nice to see the family coming together. So thinking about to use economic terms, they are stakeholders in this stove. They're all going to be the beneficiaries of it. And they're using their social capital and intellectual capital to fashion the land capital into a resource which will then mean we're seeing a group coming together with their materials, their wheelbarrow and their banana stalk. Yeah, videos as well, but I'll show this. So Deborah has some questions as well, so I'll deal with those outside of the class. And yeah, so thank you for bearing with the slightly annoying technology when it doesn't work, but stop share. Oh God, it's a bit annoying actually. Okay. Oh God, so complicated. I've got so many screens, so many windows open. Okay, back to then our theme is how we go about meeting our needs, drawing on the factors of production. We thought a bit about the history of how we think about it. We thought about ourselves as designers and drawing on the various resources we have around us. And we've seen an example of that. And we've also down and think about the different constituents of capital and how actually we can derive currency, we can derive value from these different areas and combine in a way in which we draw on the resources that we have rather than setting ourselves limits for what we haven't. We're realizing that we can learn from and create approaches to oikost, meeting our needs, learning from all different types of economic systems, and we functioning on we focus on the functions of economics. We need to use these decisions these processes to make our decisions and be informed. And I've tried to think about money in a different way. This has always been this limiting factor. When I say we're going to design within limiting factors, we haven't got any money, and that is a challenge. So, can we understand slightly better what money is by thinking about its functions, rather than thinking about it as a thing? Let's think about what it does. So, it has, and I just found this diagram earlier today. We'll explore it together. And it says money has actually different functions, a range of different functions, primary functions, secondary functions, and what it calls contingent functions. It allows us to exchange things, isn't it? Money is a facilitator of exchange. And we know that we're going to do work, we're going to arrange resources to create value, and then that value we can work out what the chicken that you created, what's that compared to the jar of honey that I've worked with my bees to create, and we can then have the money just facilitates exchange. So in a world where we are all both producers and consumers, we can facilitate meeting our needs through a barter system and explore the relative value of a chicken to a jar of honey or an hour's labor to a bundle of firewood. And allow ourselves to exchange without necessarily needing pieces of paper that say money. And let's think about that. If we're buying resources that come from outside of our community, then that's not possible to do that through barter and exchange. So that also gives us an idea that there's kind of the rules for a local economy might be different for rules for a global economy. If you want to buy petrol to put into your motorbike to drive to town, that petrol comes from, I don't know, Saudi Arabia, from America. You've got to pay for that in dollars, in hard currency. But if you just want some bananas that your neighbour's growing, you can say, I'll swap that for a chicken. So, and we could create forms of money that allow us to exchange goods and services with our neighbours within our communities, using as long as they're drawn from local and natural resources. The second function of money is, and a very important part of it, is it allows us to have savings, to store value. So honey is a store of value. Honey doesn't go off. Honey could also be a form of money. Maize dried and stored properly is also a store of value. It could be also a transfer of value, and a method of deferred payment. So if I borrow something from you today, I'm going to pay you back in a month's time. That's a deferred payment. It's an important function of money. And then it does these other things, doesn't it? It allows us to, it's a form of capital. It's a method for distributing a social income, making sure that that there could be a wide benefit. We can communicate value to lots of different people without necessarily having to carry around jars of honey. And it forms a basis of credit, of borrowing. I want to borrow some money so I can create a beehive. I'm going to make some honey, and with that honey, I'm going to sell it and turn that back into money and repay the credit. So, as permaculture designers, could we create alternative things? Can we create our own forms of currency that facilitate those functions? If money is always the limiting factor, so let's think of other forms of money that might fulfill that function. So there's the concept of time banking. If you give me an hour of your labor now, I will repay you with crops or with access to what we've created in the future. We can have different forms of exchange between ourselves once we understand that. Yeah, it's fine. If we've got money, we can buy things and buy each other's time and what have you. But if we don't have it, if we're in a situation where these wider institutions have malfunctioned or collapsed, then we're left having to work with the tools that we have. Something which fascinates me is if we can recreate the functions of money, then we can do without it. We're trying to design it so that we can build systems that help meet our needs. Oh yeah, and Deborah, I think Deborah's, yeah. So we've got, thank you for those shares, Deborah. That's also really impressive. I'll say I've shared those pictures. Okay, so I had a couple of other things I wanted to bring into this. So I have. I'm just going to have a quick look at this. So, in my old economics lecture, I was always very interested to So here's a kind of get back to this: what is money, and what is the function of money? So it's something that allows us to exchange. It's something to facilitate exchange, barter, chickens for honey. sorry, not barter, but to purchase. It's a unit of account. We can create measurements. It's a store of value. I can save some and use it next week or next year. And it's this thing about it facilitates payments in the future. Okay, let's see. And for money to be useful, we need to be able to carry it around, and it needs to not decay. Here's a very, very interesting idea. Let's see, here it is. Yeah, okay, let's go through this. So there's money, like really early types of coin that actually had a physical value. So if we had a coin made out of silver and we could weigh that and we could know that it had literally a physical value. So it's not really currency, it's more capital. It's a resource. And of course, what happened when people had silver coins or coins that had physical value is people would cut bits off them and they would get cut in half and then it became hard to know what the value of that resource was because it had been treated and changed. So then when governments, organized systems started to create money. This is a gold coin, but if you notice, it's got a milled edge and it's a regular shape, and so it's then hard to steal parts of it. And then there's a form of money which is abstract money, which actually doesn't have a value, but it facilitates the function of exchange. And there's a really interesting story about the island of Yap, which is in the Pacific Ocean. And Yap is a coral island. And coral sands and the rocks are just old fossilized pieces of coral. So they're soft and crumbly. You can't really do anything with them. They're whatever. You're limited with what you can do with them. And the story is that one day, someone from the island of Yap, they sailed 3 days across the sea to another island, and on that island they found a hard grit stone. And they thought, wow, this is amazing. I've never seen one of these before. This is so exciting. I'll bring it back to the island. So they put it on the ship and they sailed across the sea, and they were sat in a circle in the village around the fire or whatever in their community, and they said, hey, look, I found this stone. It's like a stone no one's seen before. It's a hard stone, and look how it's different. Somebody then said, oh, I like that very much. I tell you what, I'll swap it for a chicken. So then that stone then became equivalent to the value of a chicken because somebody wanted the stone. They were prepared to exchange it. So now suddenly we had a unit of currency, which was a stone, and its value was a chicken. So then some other people got in their boats and they sailed across the sea and came back with some more stones. And those stones entered the economy of the island of Yap, and they facilitated exchange, and they allowed people to trade more. And so the person who had lots more chickens than they needed could purchase timber from someone who had, think about how an economy might grow. But actually all of this was facilitated by the idea that the community had bought into the idea that this stone had intrinsic value. At the end of the day, it's just a stone. It's the beginning then perhaps of thinking about currency in a whole different way. And in some ways, the equivalent with the bees and the waggle dance or the people on Yap is that that money is information which facilitates actions and facilitates trade. But it doesn't have any specific value itself. It's not a gold doubloon or a silver coin. It's a stone. Now, lots of really interesting things happened on Yap over the coming years, and that the economy became more complex as more people brought in stones from this other island. And hey, this one looks quite like a really big one. And imagine that that stone is in front of my house and I own it. But I exchange it with someone else to buy, I don't know, some cattle or to pay a dowry for a wedding or something. But because the stone is quite heavy and we don't need to actually move it, we can just, if you like, reassign it to someone else. And what happened on Yap would be like a songs or stories told around the campfires that the stone that used to belong to that person now belongs to that person. So we didn't need to move it or chisel into it because everybody had that knowledge. So the belief system and the common understanding around it facilitated an economy to grow that became ever more complicated. Now, I'll stop there. The story goes on and on. We could think about the implications of it. But see how it was a common, in a simple way, it's just a common understanding between the stakeholders of that community that money is an abstract thing that facilitates exchange. It's not an end in itself, so we could attribute anything to being money. It's quite a mind-blowing concept to think about it. And again, this idea works when we're working with local and natural resources, when we're organizing according to a sort of permaculture idea. So this is maybe slightly abstract. Let's come back to a real situation, and this leads into the theme really of what I want to talk about for the final section of the session, which is what happens when your economy collapses. What happens when that central system that arbitrates whether it's silver or gold or pieces of paper, when that breaks down, is what happens. And this also goes back to a little bit like perhaps the problem that the people on the island of Yap were trying to understand. So this was a story about what happened after World War II. All the different countries of Europe all fought each other. They destroyed all their cities and blew up all their infrastructure and all their crops, and there was great suffering and hunger and tragedy happened, especially incredibly after the war when all the infrastructure was broken. The countries that had lost or their economies were so damaged that their currency ceased having value. The Deutschmark collapsed. We know that same thing happened in Zimbabwe, that the Zimbabwe dollar collapsed. It had no value anymore because the economy that it represented had become dysfunctional. Okay, so we're now in a situation, our economy's collapsed and we haven't got any money and no one can trade. But then my chicken lays an egg. That egg is real. There's a real thing. It's not an abstract thing, a Deutschmark or a Zimbabwe dollar lost its value. It's a real thing. That egg effectively can now become currency, can't it? But the problem is that no one can buy it because no one's got any money. So what happened after the Second World War, especially in rural communities, is that the communities themselves started creating their own money. And this is an idea called the local exchange trading system, what lets currency. And it has value because the community says so, in the same way as the community of Yap said that stones had value, and in the same way that in our modern world, our magic pieces of paper have value. This local exchange token, I think this one's from Denmark, it facilitated trade between people. So yes, I would like your egg, but I don't have any money. I'm going to pay with this currency, and I'm going to pay that back in tomorrow with the work that I do from the energy I get from eating the egg. So see how that money, all it's doing is facilitating something real to happen in the world. It's not the money that's doing it, it's the trust between the people who are in the economy. So the huge learning from this is once we understand the functions of money, we could create different forms of currency to facilitate different kinds of exchange. So this is an example of a rural community creating a token to facilitate trade between different farmers. I've got an egg, you've got some butter. We can, that person's got some bananas that we can exchange through this monetary system. This is something we could create for ourselves if we had the imagination and the trust, in the same way that Jude built the garden in Garth by creating a vision that everybody bought into. Now that might all sound a bit much, hard to imagine, but then what's Bitcoin? What's cryptocurrency? If it isn't actually the equivalent of the Yappies stone money. We're attributing value to a thing, and that whoever owns that thing is the knowledge of that is embedded in the community that gives it value. That's how cryptocurrency works. Is cryptocurrency has a memory. This coin used to belong to Steve, now it belongs to Shanaz, and Shanaz is going to spend it with Caroline, and all of that is embedded in its history. And because everything's computerized now, we can't spend it twice because the knowledge of who owns it is remembered by the community. Exactly the same as the Yappies money. So, and Bitcoin was created, I don't know, but no one knows by whom, but the idea of it came from the banking collapse and the loss of trust in this made up fiat, a paper currency. And the idea of actually, could we create something that's more like the silver coin or more like the Yappies stone money? Because in the digital world, we can create also things that are finite and have a physical reality, physically exist in terms of an identity, and they can be exchanged, and there's a ledger kept of that exchange, so we know at any one time who owns that coin. I don't know whether Bitcoin's a good thing or not, or how it will succeed or not, but it's created a whole new world of cryptocurrencies. And I think its ledger system of remembering the transactions, called the blockchain, is a very significant invention of the late 20th century. So if money only really is information, it allows us to make decisions about how to allocate resources. It's in some way a feedback mechanism that tells producers what to produce. It gives rewards and incentives for people to participate, and it allows for future planning and investment. So money is fulfilling a function, and we can create other things with our imagination, it's happened before, that also fulfill that function. So again, let's not see money always as a limiting factor. It's only a limiting factor when we want to go and use it to purchase resources from outside of our economy, and then we need to find harder forms of currency. So I'm fascinated with this, and again, I'll stop before we go down into the next layer of the economic kind of problem. But I guess I'm trying to say that if we can understand the functions, we realize that we can create tools that fulfill those functions, which allow us to go ahead whether we have this financial resource or not. Oops. Any questions on that bit? I know it's a bit hard because it gets a bit abstract, and sometimes I give a lot more time to this. Can you imagine creating our own forms of money, or alternative currencies, or how, what we might learn from the gift economy, from the trade and barter economy? Yeah. Was that someone? Caroline.
Yeah, like here in Kenya, Kenya has some of the big slums. In fact, the biggest slum in Africa. But there's one in Mombasa where they have devised their own form of currency. The place is called Bangladesh, so they have called their currency Bangla Pesa. You know, Pesa is Swahili for money. So I don't know how they're using it, and it's like they've even started using it. There's a mobile service provider which they have incorporated, so you can use the unit over your phone, and it is transacting. It is working. At some stage, the government tried to resist. People were arrested, but I guess, you know, they continued using it. So the government had to live with it. It's not legal, but they are using it. So another thing that I'm trying to promote in the villages when I train the women, I'm trying to promote the barter system. You know, when we talk about people care and fair share, I try to encourage the women, okay, it is scarce to find money, but if you can produce different types of things, you can be able to barter trade this. So everybody, you know, has whatever they need. Unlike cases whereby you need to look for the money to buy what you need. But if your friend is growing this type of vegetable, you're growing another type, somebody is growing sweet potatoes. So, you know, you can just exchange and everybody's needs are served and everybody is happy. Thank you.
Simon, please. Thank you very much for that, Caroline. That's really, really, really interesting. And like you say, it's about removing the barriers so we can facilitate trade with what we have rather than sit there waiting for something that we don't have. Simon.
Yes. When I grew up, the essence of money has kept on changing. It is value from government to government. When I grew up, the shillings of Uganda by that time in the 1970s, 1960s, 1980s there, it had good value as compared to the Ugandan money of today, the shillings. And here in Teso region, the local communities, they don't have that ready cash at their hand, but they have brought in the aspect of barter trade, whereby what they are lacking and what they are producing, they are in position to exchange from the other person to the next person in form of the value of their commodities as compared to the other one's product. Like here, when it comes to time of harvesting granules, these other people from Palisa region, they cross the borders of their districts. They come to Ngora, Soroti, Kumi, Bukedia. They exchange when one needs a Benson, or when one needs a jerrycan, or when one needs salt. He or she brings the aspect of a basket of granules to exchange of a basket of granules for exchange of salt. Now, it implies that people have known that money itself has got value. Money has what? Has got value. It is a medium of exchange for commodities. It is a medium of exchange for commodities from one place to another, from one person to another person. But when it is not there at that time, the system of barter trade comes in to submit the other aspect of ready cash to a person. Thank you. That's what I wanted to contribute.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Simon, again. Really interesting. So the final thing that I was going to have a quick look at, which is a resource we can share. I thought I'd go back to this idea of bioregional organization, which was this diagram which we were given. In the context of responding to whatever, a catastrophe or something, a system breaking, I'm really conscious of the fragility of our interconnected, globalized system, of how we've become to rely on abstract things like money and I don't know, mobile phones to facilitate meeting our needs. And the question that keeps coming back to my mind is, what happens if those break down? What happens if there are ruptures in the global system with this war in Ukraine? And it's not just Russia and Ukraine, really, it's America and European countries wrestling for influence over what happens next. That's very scary. That's going to disrupt global supply systems. There's going to be shortages. There's going to be shortages of food. There's going to be shortages of energy, or let's say disruptions in the supply. Now, in Uganda, you source your food and energy much more locally and at a much more sustainable way. So there's opportunities to meet needs locally are much stronger there. In the UK, we import a lot of stuff, which makes us much more vulnerable. So I keep coming back to this idea of if these globalized systems rupture or malfunction or have periods where they're not working, we're going to have to organize ourselves from the bottom up. We're going to have to find ways to facilitate trade and exchange with maybe different economic tools than the global ones. And I'm trying to explore really by saying, as we understand the functions of money, the functions of economy, we can use that understanding to help us reorganize from the bottom up. So when with the organizational chart that we looked at, this is what, again, drawn from chapter 14 of Bill Mollison's book, is the guy who made that map has also created this handbook of how to organize ourselves, catastrophe management, bioregional organization. So I'm going to add this as a resource, which I think we'll find interesting to look at and to download and go into it a bit more deeply. So the intention of this work is to introduce communities to permaculture, to demonstrate the practical applications of the invisible structures outlined in Permaculture, a Designer's Manual by Bill Mollison, chapter 14. As stated in the first column of this chapter, these strategies may, in fact, be of more assistance to real change than the skills of land management. It is not the lack of the will to cooperate. It is not that people lack the will to cooperate, it is more often that they have not adopted those sensible legal and administrative or social mechanisms that allow them to cooperate. So our ability to come together and work together is more important than all of this permaculture knowledge that I'm giving you about. We can solve the problems in the land, but we can't do that if we can't come together as communities. So permaculture, permanent culture, is the applied science of systems thinking, firmly grounded in ecology, in reality. Permaculture as a design system contains nothing new. It arranges what was always there in a different way so that it works to conserve energy or to generate more energy than it consumes. Design is the key word. Design in landscape, social and conceptual design systems, and design in space and time. So, and we know this, and permaculture is framed in these ethics of care for the earth, care for the people, and this reinvestment of surplus back into caring for the earth and caring for the people. With this ethical framework, we can bring people together in common cause to think about how we organize to meet our needs. And the more we meet our needs from local and natural resources, from the common capital that we have amongst us, then the fewer barriers there are for us to organize. Now we've already been introduced to the idea that in this model there's 9 areas for us to think about. But to think about food and supporting the systems that produce our food. We need to have plans and strategies to maintain buildings. We need to be able to maintain livelihood, the other ways that we bring in the materials that we need. There needs to be a social support structure. We need to be able to draw in and educate new people and allow them to become part of our bioregional organization. We need to have a set of strategies in place around supporting health. Now imagine if hospitals break down or you can't get foreign medicines, what would we do? We'd have to have a set of strategies in place to meet those needs. And we need to have economic tools and instruments so that there's an effective exchange, a barter system going on so that we can access and afford those things that we need. Information support. All systems, again, are underpinned by knowledge and information and training. And we've got community and security, transport, and then future trends and threats. We also, as a group, need to be thinking ahead. So, gosh, that's a lot to think about. So, the author has set out step by step how we might go about that, how we might bring people together as a group and build a common understanding, a trust. And what I'm realizing is that that's something that needs to be constantly invested in. So thousands of years ago, the Toltec were known throughout southern Mexico as women and men of knowledge. The Toltec were scientists and artists who formed a society to explore and conserve spiritual knowledge and practices of the ancient ones. The 4 agreements is their gift to help us facilitate effective cooperation with each other. So we're trying to work within our ethics, and we're trying to organize ourselves as a group, but we've got to actually have a way of being with each other so that we are effective. And these are the 4 agreements, as written by Don Miguel Ruiz, copyright 1997. Be impeccable with your word. Speak with integrity. Say only what you mean. Avoid using the word to speak against yourself or to gossip about others. Use the power of your word in the direction of truth and love. So we have to speak with integrity, especially when we're in a group and we're facing challenges. Number 2, don't take anything personally. Nothing others do is because of you. What others say and do is a projection of their own reality, their own dream. When we are immune to the opinions and actions of others, you won't be the victim of needless suffering. 3, don't make assumptions. Find the courage to ask questions and to express what you really want. Communicate with others as clearly as you can to avoid misunderstandings, sadness, and drama. With just this one agreement, you can completely transform your life. Don't make assumptions, ask questions. Always do the best you can. Your best is going to change from moment to moment. It will be different when you are healthy or sick. Under any circumstances, do your best, and you will avoid self-judgment, self-abuse, and regret. It's a very powerful thoughts, and to sit that within how we might come together to organize ourselves, to meet, to begin to organize from the bottom up, bioregionally. In a bottom-up system, we each have to contribute the best we can. And I do that by speaking with integrity. Don't take it personally. Don't make assumptions. Just keep trying. This is how we learn. So in this handbook, the author has broken down these different functions and given like a form to fill in. This might be, again, a useful framework to use to discuss to discuss and break down these different areas. Who, if in the event of, so if we're looking down under different headings, social support, okay, how do we introduce new people to the group? How do we inform people about what we're doing? Can we organize work groups so people can come and work alongside us and see how they might take part? We could have groups of people coming together to discuss ideas, have ideas about problem solving and improving the system. And we might go out and visit other projects and reach out to other people. And all of these might be strategies to involve more people in our project, in what we're doing. So again, is using an example of Jude in the Garth Garden. She had spaces where people could think and talk about organic cultivation so they could understand the system. They had organized work groups, cutting, building the gardens, making the compost heaps, making the tea, doing different things. She had the notice board showing information so that new people could come and join the group. And they went on expeditions. They came and spoke to people like me and contributed to my permaculture course. All of that was a social support function to strengthen the group that's then going to fit into this overall matrix of helping us meet our needs. And within the manual, it breaks down under each heading how we might go about that. So what he says in what the manual says, it gives us that we're going to look at each of these functions and we're going to build a team around that function of 3 people. And that the idea being that once we've got 3 people, that's enough to support that function, and then we go on to the next one. And that within each group, they have the autonomy, the ability to make their own decisions and action them. We don't need to consult with all the other groups. So in this social support group, we have 3 people here who make the key decision, who make the strategic decisions, allocate resources to these other areas, and there's other areas all operate in a way in which it feeds to make the whole stronger. I suspect we will need all of these tools to organize ourselves should we find ourselves in a situation where we're having to reinvent and rebuild from the bottom up. And I'm gonna I will place that on the webpage as another resource, and it's like a workbook to go through it, break down each thing, and then as you're working through each challenge, we need to fulfill needs for health, we need to fulfill needs for food, fulfill needs for building, fulfill needs for social outreach, and so forth. And think about entrepreneurial enterprise around each one of those functions, because we can then create enterprises and projects and strategies that support and fulfill that function, that are informed and resourced from the resources within the social and cultural capital, the physical capital of our own community. Yeah, there we go. So I'm going to kind of begin to try and wind up now. We've taken quite a bit of a ramble. I know it's a complicated topic, but I've tried to think about economic tools, understand money as a facilitator, not as an end in itself or as a limiting factor. And we've explored this idea of different forms of capital and how we've combined those together to create revenue, to create income streams, to create food, to create social cohesion. And the more we can design to operate within the existing social and physical capital of our community, the more then we're enabled then to action these plans and to make progress. Yeah, any quite a mouthful, really. Any thoughts? Any other questions or anything like that from the rest of the group? Caroline, great.
Yeah, I like what you said at the end, and probably this is what usually differentiates people's thoughts and the way people live, perceive each other, and relate with each other. Money should be seen as a means to an end, not an end in itself, because if you have so much money, but it's not, you yourself, you're not using it, it's not helping other people, you're just accumulating it, you're just keeping it. And sometimes this makes people assume some power, just because they have the money. But if everybody could know that money is a means to an end, and not an end in itself, just the acquisition of it, then we would have our values in place, and I think the world would be a better place.
Very well said. And we have to work with what we have and to see these things as tools to facilitate the building the processes that help us meet our needs. Gosh, that's a bit of a mouthful, but I think there's something insightful in all of this, and there's something that shows us how we're seeing the money as the goal, and we see the need for outside inputs from outside constantly, which becomes a barrier. Shanaz, any thoughts from you? Has this rung any bells for you?
Well, yes, it always does. I mean, exactly as Caroline says, money is exactly that. It's a means to an end, but we've become such an individualistic society where everybody only looks just, to fulfill their own needs and means, and because we're not geared towards community. I mean, what permaculture does is it makes us look again at community and at those around us, and how we can in fact effectively live in community rather than, you know, sort of isolated, which is what we've tend to have become. And I mean, it almost means that you have to almost redefine everything. And I think that's no bad thing, because we seem to be hurtling nowhere. So, you know, if this is as good a time as any is to try and make a change, this is a good way to go.
Yeah, see the possibilities, not the limitations. The system that we're part of is clearly malfunctioning because it's failing to meet the needs of many people. And so therefore we have to reform it and change it. And as we were talking earlier, we don't necessarily know what's going to happen in the long term, but in the immediate term, we've got to build systems that are fit for purpose. And as permaculture designers, we're taking a degree of responsibility for that. We're not waiting for the UNHCR or Richard Branson or Oxfam to come and save us. We're going to organize ourselves from the bottom up. If we can win resources from outside, great. We'll use that to strengthen our systems, but we won't use it to build a system that's dependent on outside resources. That's what we have to learn. And that's the sort of these economic tools which show us that as soon as we're producers, as soon as we've got something to trade with, and that includes all these different forms of capital, then we can build projects. And we don't need, again, external permission or resources to achieve it. We can just get on with it. Easier said than done, but these are the lessons that we have to learn. And it's the experience of doing this will make us leaders in our communities or pioneers or, you know, whatever. Someone has to take that initiative. Someone has to be to do the role that Jude did, as in she initiated that project. I had one more slide to show, so I might just, if I can find it again, navigating through all this stuff is, and we've had this before, but I just thought it was relevant because we're talking about diversity.
Yeah.
Okay, hang on. Where is it? Share screen. This one. Share. Okay, and this is about the diversity of functions in a group and how we might all contribute to a group's function in different ways, and sometimes we might contribute in all of these different ways. But so this was the Edward de Bono 6 hat thinking model, and we looked at it in the people and permaculture section. And it's this idea of, you know, if you have a foot forward, is there are different roles to play. And in the example that we saw of Garth Community Garden, someone had to wear the blue hat, the blue sky thinking, that, if you like, set the rules of the game, took a leading management role. Jude said, hey, let's come together and start a community garden. Then, you know, whether it's one person roles or whether it's different people, but it's the function that we're interested in. So there's someone with the blue hat going, yes, let's make a community garden. But it's going to take real problem solving and creativity to go, yeah, but it's a really steep slope and the ground's going to wash away. And someone from a black hat perspective will say, there's lots of difficulties here, there's challenges here. We're going to have to think about all of these limitations. So then we're going to have to use our creativity to solve the difficulties and dangers. So we need contributions from every aspect to bring together to enable our process to go ahead. Well, in any process that we're going through, that's going to trigger our feelings. I feel scared, I feel happy, I feel compromised, I feel, excited. idea. Don't know why, but I think, yes, it's a good idea. Think about how these different perspectives might contribute to the coming together and the successful delivery of a project. The white hat is for paper. Think of facts, of keeping the notes of a minute, the minutes of a meeting, or the notes of a discussion, or keeping the financial accounts. Somebody needs to fulfill that role, or that role needs to be factored for in our team functioning. So in our bioregional organization model, in each one of those groups of 3, you're going to have to look at the problem from all of these different aspects. There's a diversity of thinking, and we're looking at a diversity of strategies that are going to combine together as a community to allow us to face the challenges and meet our needs and build new systems. There we go. Use and value diversity. Build achievable plans from available resources, but understand that we have to build complex strategies to do that, and they need to be able to learn and grow as we do them. I've given you some templates and structures to think about how we might actually do that. And I'm going to post these resources on the webpage, or at lesson 20, and I'd love to get your feedback. We've now got a WhatsApp group. If you haven't signed up for it, then please do. You can send your contacts to Gerald. If you don't have them, then we'll find a way around. But let's keep talking. And I think that we're creating something that is ongoing, and even beyond this course, let's think about how we operate as a community, and think about what economic tools we might create to facilitate exchange between us. And on we go.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you, everybody. It's been a good class. Lots to think about.
Thank you. I'm glad. Thank you very much. Frustration for Stella's sound. I would assume that I'm glad that you're here with us, Stella. I hope you found it interesting. And yeah, any questions? Yeah, thank you, Caroline. Food for thought. Lots to think about. And Simon, thank you so much for your contributions as well. All really good. Simon, yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Mentor, for that nice, wonderful session that you have given on to us, your learners. I've brought the appeal from APAD as I was with my mentor, Deborah. We were having a meeting today, and then after that meeting, we went on that construction of Lorna House to demonstrate for other members, and we are trying to join the 8 groups that TAPA has given birth to make a recap of all that we have been learning, since most of them got cut off from accessing the sessions. So they called upon us to at least call them together before we submit anything that we would hope is vital to you, and then we give them also that recap of all that we have been learning. That's why you see there is some delay in feedback giving from TAPA to you. It is because of that cry from those other groups that they could not access that service due to the inefficiency or inadequate of the resources to be used for accessing you. So that is what TAPA and PAD at large have called upon for you. They are saying be patient with them. They will respond perhaps that feedback that you need. That's what they are telling me to tell you. Unfortunately, today my chairman has been a bit down. He has got some kind of malaria. That's why you see, he would be the one talking to you, perhaps that, but I have to come in to represent him at a certain time. And we are saying really capital, labor, and the land as factors of production are essential elements that one would join together to see that the productivity has to be produced, and that will increase on the food production, food security, and to increase on the standards of living of the local people around us. But I've got some members here of APAD. Maybe they want to say something to you, or they want to say hi, or they want to greet you. You can hear them.
Please do, yes, you're very welcome.
Francis.
Okay, hi Steve. I'm Francis Itonya from TAPA. Good day.
Thank you. Just say,
Yes?
this whole process, it just exists to help support each other, you know, and so we hope that this is being useful to you. We understand the difficult for the connectivity, but what we hopefully we're creating something which we can build on and something which we can maintain. So as we get to know each other and we maintain our communication, we can all continue to learn and grow together and build our network.
Yes.
So we're very patient and we understand the many challenges that you have and limitations.
Yeah. That is what they told me to tell you. So I appreciate Caroline. I appreciate those other members in absence of Gerald today. Anyway, everything is okay. It has been nice contribution. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Stella's just saying, without proper coordination and management, money's wasted due to duplication of interventions. That's why it's important to understand what each other is doing in a team. And I think that's a very good point. And I think this organizational map that we're looking at, you know, I'm learning a lot from looking at it myself, and it's inspiring me to think about, you know, if we don't organize, we either replicate functions and then we end up almost competing with each other. And that will be the last thing we want to do, especially as we face, you know, levels of challenge with weather and food and money and everything else. So thank you, Stella. Very, very good point. And I think you're seeing the value in what we're talking about. Yeah, Caroline.
Yeah, sometimes even not just competing, but you end up duplicating what, you know, like I've seen sometimes in organizations, when you're working in a certain geographical area, because of lack of coordination, you end up duplicating what the other is doing, you see. But if everybody did something different, you'd all be able to get somewhere with whatever work it is that you're doing. But you find everybody's doing the same thing and leaving other areas untouched. Yeah, so coordination is important.
Yes, and that's so that we're not just all focusing on growing green veg and then competing for the market, that we've spread ourselves out strategically. So I think in a crisis, we tend to be more like a commander economy, a centrally planned economy. We're going to plan things out very carefully. And when things are functioning well, we can be more like a market economy where, you know, everybody's producing goods and services and trading and finding out the value. But as soon as we're in a crisis, we need to make sure that we are thinking about food, buildings, health, communications, social, emergency, you know, whatever it was, all those different things. So again, I think we've got these different models and we can embrace all of them and realize it's about understanding what's appropriate for the time and the specific, you know, circumstance that we're in. Okay. Thank you everyone for your attention, and we have reached our